Growing up in an evangelical megachurch, that was something that when things started to come to the surface, which they tend to do in these places where we give one person too much, everything that I was taught was quote unquote bad was then surfaced as, oh, this is actually what's happening here. For me in my journey, it's been about the pursuit of light at all cost. And I think the path can be difficult in that, but also life is difficult, and when it leads to life and joy and the beauty that unfolds from that journey, I can look back at this midpoint in my life and say that that pursuit of light is still well worth the journey, and that's still my prayer today.
Whether you're looking for inspiration, guidance, or simply a moment of reflection, you're in the right place. This is Wisdom Stripes. Hello and welcome to Wisdom Stripes. My name is Meg Tuohey, and in today's episode, we're diving into the intersection of creativity, healing, and the profound shifts that come when we align our lives with our true purpose. Our guest today is Laurie Fox, a woman who has lived many lives, each contributing to the wisdom and insight she shares with the world today. From growing up in an evangelical bubble and working with celebrities in Hollywood, to ethical fashion initiatives in some of the poorest places on earth, Laurie has experienced a diverse and unconventional journey. In recent years, after facing burnout, multiple near-death experiences, and struggles with adrenal fatigue, Laurie turned to Taoist and Chinese medicine practices to heal and transform her life. She now has a thriving healing practice in Santa Fe, Dragonfly Chi and Vitality, and a heart-centered branding company, the Capstone Method. Laurie continues to pursue her creative passions through art and fashion, all while guiding others on their healing journeys. Today, we'll uncover the wisdom Laurie gained from her life experiences, her path to healing, and how she's using her knowledge to help others align with their own hearts and create a life that truly serves them. I'm thrilled to welcome Laurie Fox to today's episode. This is Wisdom Stripes, your no-nonsense, fierce fairy godmothers guiding you through life's twists and turns, helping you heal, grow, and create a life you love. Laurie, we always start with the same question for our guests. What wisdom would you like a listener to come away with today?
For me in my journey, it's been about the pursuit of light at all cost. And I think the path can be difficult in that, but also life is difficult. And when it leads to life and joy and the beauty that unfolds from that journey, I can look back at this midpoint in my life and say that that pursuit of light is still well worth the journey, and that's still my prayer today.
That's a beautiful way to start a podcast. I wonder, could you define what you mean by light?
I think for me in my religious upbringing, I was raised evangelical Christian. It was a very extreme emotional expression of faith. From the time I was 3 until the year 2000, I was probably in my early 20s. I was in a bubble of going to the same school and church that was on the same campus 7 days a week. And with that, as I began my journey out of that, I also had a lot of very dramatic church experiences. So all the people I had grown up trusting ended up having this very dramatic explosion of chaos, I guess, that took place without getting into all the details. But it's your typical church kind of mega church kind of situations that happen in America. Growing up in an evangelical mega church, and also having the experience of that being the same school and the same church that I was in for my entire upbringing, that was something that when things started to come to the surface, which they tend to do in these places where we give one person too much power, everything that I was taught was quote unquote bad was then surfaced as, oh, this is actually what's happening here. And I remember a time I was in high school. All of this stuff had just gone down with the school and the church. And I remember going to the flagpole. It was my duty to like raise the flag every day. And I felt like the person of Christ came to me and said, are you going to follow me or are you going to follow man? And at that point, I said, I will follow you at all costs. And that journey began to take me out of all of the dogma that I was raised in, all of the expectations, all the quote unquote shoulds. Should be doing this. You know, if you're God's got a lot of grace and it's you don't have to work for it, but you better do this, this, and this, you know, on the list. So when I began to come out of that, and I had also always been really fascinated by religion and studying other religions, talking to people from other religions, whereas most of the people I was around were really afraid to engage with other people of other religions. That wasn't a fear for me. And from that, and also traveling quite a bit with ethical fashion and being steeped in these communities that were Muslim and Buddhist and Hindu, tribal cultures, I began to see some differences even within the religions, but also a lot of similarities. And it tended to be that there was this thing about light and darkness. And I also started working on I do watercolor painting, and I was working on a show for a gallery in Dallas. And the show was called Source and Reflection. And it was this idea of what is source, sun energy, and what is reflection, moon energy. And then how does that also correlate spiritually of what is our source and what are we a reflection of? And from there, I started doing light studies on what is the nature of light? What is light? You know, the spectrum of light. What is it that our eyes are programmed to see? So right now I'm going back to a lot of those studies, and I'm getting into my blue and red era, because in the light spectrum, you know, clothing wise, I'm going to start wearing a lot of blue and red this next like season for me, because in the light spectrum, red and blue are the start of that spectrum. And beyond that, we can't see. So our eyes are only programmed to see what's in that red and blue spectrum. So right there's a limitation on what we have an understanding of. And again, going back to like, we have such a limited understanding. We have such a finite understanding in this time construct that we're in, that getting back to the point of having my faith come down to what is source light and what am I reflecting? So am I that dark part of the moon? Am I that light reflecting part of the moon? And then also, how do I step into that light that I'm calibrating myself towards? So I would say that my spirituality now is more in who is for light and who is for darkness. And when I say light, I mean joy, hope, peace, goodness, causing harmony and not disharmony, causing creation and not destruction. And within all of these religious constructs throughout all over the world, many different cultures and countries, it became very clear to me that there was people in all those expressions, no matter what the language was that was being used, that were for creation and for goodness, and that were for darkness and destruction, even within religious context. And that's certainly what I grew up with, being in that evangelical Christian world of seeing like, oh no, there was people that were very sincere and good and beautiful. And yet there was people that were there for their own gain and using the language to manipulate.
Okay, so then my question becomes, if we're in the light space of creation, it does really occur to me that without destruction, there is no ending. So there can be no beginning, which is what the light symbolizes to me. Is that your philosophy, or do you see things from a different perspective?
I do see things from a different perspective. While we're in the construct of duality, we're in the construct of yin and yang, of these opposites that make the other possible. Without darkness, we wouldn't have light. And so I'm very aware that while I'm dropped into this three-dimensional world with, physical tangibility, that my choice of the two is to be for light, because that's where I'm returning. But I do believe that when I return to this light, that it just will be. There won't be a name for it. It just is. Who knows? I mean, what's beyond? We don't know. We have these feelings. We have these belief systems that give us peace, and we live our lives by that. And I think if those belief systems are producing in our life what we're wanting our life to be and what we're wanting to see with the environment around us, with the people around us, then we're walking in the right direction. That does sometimes get difficult when everything around us does feel dark, and yet still maintaining that light, because there is this certain amount of stress that comes with that. I think it's not just like peace and flowers and fluffy bubbles,
That's not the human way.
No.
That you can access that in the human experience, but the human experience is very difficult as well. What about the piece that, and I'm just really interested, I have no opinion here, but what about the piece around how every new beginning comes from some other beginning's end? And so there is a certain amount of destruction in order to participate in creation. I wonder what your sense is in that space. There must be darkness in order to create more light. Is that too simplistic, too reductive?
I think that's a right way to look at it, because that's what nature shows us all around. There's constant destruction and rebirth. That's the process. That's what it is to be human, to be of nature. I also think of a book that I read a long time ago, and now I give it to every graduate that I meet. That's it's called "The Obstacle is the Way" by a guy out of Austin. In the book, he talks about how when obstacles come up, that is actually the pathway to get to where we're going. And so I think about that in the destruction of certain things, that we've built up these lives. And for me, I feel like I've had multiple lives that I've burnt out of. And it felt like I was constantly building these cities only to have them crumble and having to start again, and having to do that a few times in my life at this point. I'm 47 and I'm reaching midlife, and I'm starting to go, okay, these patterns were not serving me. But also the destruction of that was leading towards this passage into something else. And I think I tended to have these habits of throwing the baby out with the bathwater, which weren't healthy. And now I'm learning to embrace that and not do that, but to really sit with those things and watch them transform. And so with that book, The Obstacle is the Way, just thinking about when we're moving through these spaces and it feels like we're building, and the job goes away, the partner that we had put all of our trust in goes away, the faith that we had starts to crumble, whatever it may be, that those are actually a foundation to release some of those old patterns of habit and see what's coming and what's new, which is actually better, and it's part of our evolution. So that process, and also like hanging on to those tenets of that obstacle that's coming up, is actually what's pointing me towards what's next. And there comes an excitement with that. I think in the past, it was always such a drudge, and it was so full of hopelessness, where I'm like, oh, I just spent all these years investing in this thing, and now I have nothing to show for it. Or, it's not something that's going to be my legacy on this earth, And being able to let go of that and go, okay, that went away. It's not supposed to be, but I completely trust that God, the universe, my source, my light, has got my back for what's next and is here to support me in wherever I'm heading next. And that produces a real excitement where instead of constantly grasping and holding on and striving, it turns into this palms up, receiving, accepting, and a deep knowing that we don't have to strive and struggle. I had worked on a film that had a couple of palms up scenes in it. And it was a time when I really needed to hear that message. And it was a film called Saronia with Tony Hale. And the story's really beautiful, talking about this musician who's trying to make it and his career's not going anywhere. And the character that Tony was playing, he has this thing where he was saying he's a lawyer, and he's saying that when people are on the stand to testify, I tell them when they're sitting behind the stand to put their palms up on their lap so that they're not clenching. And it's this thing of surrender to what is. And later in the scene, there's a character that he was having some strife with, and he comes to the front door and he's got his palms up. So he personally was then like, okay, now I need this. So the beauty of that became kind of a mantra in my life of palms up, shit's hitting the fan, palms up.
It's beautiful. I just turned my hands and I immediately felt the difference. Not that I realized I had tension. I'm thoroughly enjoying this conversation, but it changed my physiology anyway.
It really helps. Even driving, if you've got one hand in your lap or, it's just like having that mentality of, okay, palms up. All is okay. All is well. Present in the here and now. And also accepting the support that's coming from places we can't see and the beauty in that.
We, in your bio, we heard evangelical church, we heard celebrity fashion, and then ethical, and then Chinese medicine. So I feel like we've done evangelical. Let's now do celebrity fashion. And you sort of alluded to it just then, but not in a lot of detail. Tell us everything. What is the world of celebrity fashion that you came from?
I lived in Los Angeles for a little over 10 years. And during that time, I had originally gone out to LA to be an actor. And I had trained and had a degree in theater performance. And even during that time, I wasn't really great on stage, but I really found my passion when I got to the costume shop. And that was something that just my creativity started to fly. I do love performing, but being in the costume area, it was this behind the scenes and just really making something out of nothing, and also telling the story of that character through tangible fabrics and colors and textures. And that really excited me. When I moved to Los Angeles, I was still in acting school for film and TV, or really commercial work. And then at that point, I started dipping into the costume wardrobe realm. So in that, I was mainly doing music videos, film, and in the music video, well, all of that stuff. You're working with a lot of high caliber celebrity people. And then I also was doing, in the music realm, I was doing some tour prep for Rihanna, Lady Gaga's hair bows for her Australian tour, actually. Yay. Full circle. And yeah, just being able to see behind the veil, maybe, of what that looks like. Being in my 20s, I moved to Los Angeles very naively, like most 20-year-olds do, thinking, I want to be famous and this is like everything that I want in life. And then when it doesn't work out that way, realizing that so much of my value I had attached to what that desire was, when that wasn't true. That wasn't who I truly was created to be. And so being able to start working with celebrities and seeing that they're people too.
Mm-hmm.
And there's not a lot of stability when you're in that position. You're constantly having to vie for people's attention. The higher up you get, my old acting coach had likened it to climbing Mount Everest. And the higher up you get, there's this lack of oxygen. It's kind of hard to breathe. There's not a lot of people around. At that point, you can start choosing who's going to be in your life, which isn't the healthiest thing. You don't have the reflection of those around you that are really trusted that will say, hey, you're being a shithead, like, stop it. And the more, like, the older I get, the more I value those friendships where they're like, hey, what did you mean when you did that? Or what's going on here? So thankful for that. But in that realm, you really don't have a lot of control of your life. I mean, truly, someone else is telling you basically what to do. And there are a few celebrities that, especially like Lady Gaga and some of those people that are just like, I mean, on tour, she would spend her own money to make something happen, which was really incredible.
Yes.
And I know there's other musicians and artists who have done that too. And I really respect them for being true to their craft and their art, despite the corporate machine that sends artists through the ringer. But I think at that point, I started to see that my value was misplaced. And so it helped me to recalibrate my life to say, what's important to me? Is it important to me that my career makes me famous? Or is it important to me that my career produces something in me that produces connection in other people, change in other people's lives? And even if I never get the credit for that, now I'm okay with that, because now it's like, as long as it's making this world a better place, that's my goal. So that was a little bit of my extent in that realm. And I did get burned out from it. I also would see a lot of costumers, wardrobe people that were in their, mid 50s or so, and they were just miserable and like, it's being in wardrobe. It's kind of hard. You're the first one to set. You're the last one to leave. You have to go home and do all the laundry and get everything prepped for the next day. So you truly never rest. It's very little sleep. And I just knew for my nervous system and my energy level, I'm like, I cannot have a long-term career in this. So I ended up going to fashion school and pivoting into fashion.
Let's do fashion school. What happened then?
I had burned out from the Hollywood scene. I went back to Texas for a year. My mom was very gracious to let me come and live with her. And I, again, had a church experience in Los Angeles that was negative, was making me lose faith in the whole system altogether. And then my career didn't work out as it should, not as it should, but as I wanted it to.
As you wished.
As I wished it to. And I just was at the end of me. There was nothing left I had to give. I had given everything. And then in that time, I went to therapy, talk therapy, for probably 2 to 3 times a week. I worked at the Nasher Sculpture Center in Dallas in their gift store at the time. And then I was just sleeping, just could barely function. And I remember one of my bosses at the Nasher came up to me. He was kind of this gruff guy. He was actually, at first I was managing the cafe, and then I transitioned into the store. But when I was managing the cafe, he was, came up to me as this New York kind of guy. And he was like, Lori, I don't know what's wrong with you, but you're going to be fine. And for some reason, that was like exactly what I needed to hear. He was not religious. He was real rough around the edges. And he just spoke truth to me. Like, I'm going to be fine. And I just was so in my head and so in my disappointment. And sorrow and hopelessness that it's like I couldn't see beyond, again, who I actually was created to be. So when I transitioned into the store, I was working for this incredible woman named Dana Mullins, and she's since passed. She was an incredible merchandiser, product development. She worked for Neiman Marcus for many, many years and just had this incredible eye for knowing what was going to sell, knowing how to merchandise it. If something wasn't selling, she'd re-merchandise the whole store and it would sell like hotcakes. It's just like, how do you do this? So I would always call it her magic Dana dust that she would put on everything.
Wow.
And from that, it really got me into a love of design and seeing from the costuming and the wardrobe stuff, oh, that can translate into the retail space. So from that, I thought, okay, I've spent this year in Dallas. I'm going back to Los Angeles and I'm going to go to fashion school. So I went to FIDM, the Fashion Institute of Design and Merchandising, and I got a degree in apparel manufacturing and management. At the time, it was a 2008 crash. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, hello, world, I'm ready to work. And people that had been in the industry for 30 years were packing up shop and retiring or getting out of the business because they couldn't survive. So it was just like, oh, what am I going to do? And when I was in school, they would say, why are you here? What do you want to be? And most people were like, I want to be a famous fashion designer. I want to do like really alternative fabrics that are eco-friendly, things like that. And I was like, I want to get women and children out of sex trafficking and somehow do that with fashion. Didn't know how that was going to be possible, but just knew that there was a need for work to be created in these places that didn't have a lot of opportunity in order for there to be opportunity for them to not have to succumb to sex trafficking or, the sex trade, all of that. So I met with some other people who we were on the same frequency, I think, with that. And they were starting a brand called Raven and Lily. And they said, oh, do you want to come be one of our volunteer designers? There were 7 of us that were volunteering. And from that, the owner was like, oh, I have this trip planned. I don't know who's going to go with me. And I was like, I'll go. And she's like, really? And I'm like, yeah, really? She's like, yeah. So we figured it out. And I started initiating those partnerships with figuring out what the structure looked like for them, figuring out what their local materials were, how we could utilize that. Also, figuring out what the skill level of the workers was in order to spread the collection so that everyone could be working and not just the advanced workers or the intro level workers. So there was a lot of things to think about, even within it just being fashion and, oh, I'm a designer, I'm going to go over and design a bag or design some jewelry. It was a little more like social development work in the midst of that. I really fell in love with that. And now that was back in 2008 when we got that started. And I just got back from Ethiopia a couple weeks ago, and it's so incredible to see those artisans that are still employed, that are now out of poverty. I remember it was maybe 10 years after we had gotten that started and going back and having the revelation of getting into that room. Especially, I'm thinking of Ethiopia right now in particular, but I also worked in India and Burundi and some other places. But that Ethiopian group in particular, walking into that room and seeing the women had their hair done, some of them were starting to move off the mountain where they would get dropped off because they had HIV. Their children were starting to get educated and starting to go to college. I mean, it broke the cycle of poverty, not just for a single woman, but for this entire village, like community of women who had HIV and who were told you're worth nothing. And to see that someone buying one necklace made ethically, that someone was paid fairly, that they had a safe work environment, it just continued to fire that passion in me. So I really do believe in ethical fashion. And if if your listeners don't know what that is, I encourage you to look up what fair trade is, what ethical fashion is, and really try to support those groups, even your local crafters and your local makers. It makes such a difference. We've got these major corporations that are just getting bigger, and it's just taking over more and more of our lives, and it's disconnecting us. We don't go to the store anymore and have those beautiful interactions. Hey, Sam, thanks for ringing up my groceries. We don't do that anymore.
Yes.
It's just this truck that delivers. We never usually see the driver. It's just so sterile. And so how do we return to that humanity, not only in our day-to-day lives, but also in the ways that we consume? And not to say that any of these big corporations are evil or we got to get rid of them, because they really have made our lives easier in a lot of respects. But how do we balance that where we can say, oh, I need soap or I need a candle? That's a really easy thing for a local person to make. Who locally can I support that one candle I'm going to buy is going to help them, with their rent, with their kids, with whatever, because that's their business and that's their passion. So really seeking what do we value and how do we want that to reflect around us by how we're consuming, whether that's in fashion or how we shop for groceries or, et cetera, et cetera.
I love that very much. Hey there, Meg Tuohey here with a quick and exciting announcement. As a psychologist, coach, and founder of the Wisdom Lab, I've had the privilege of helping thousands of individuals break free from the vicious cycles holding them back and tap into their infinite inner wisdom. If you're tired of feeling unheard, unseen, and stuck in the same old struggles, the Wisdom Lab is the breakthrough you've been yearning for. This on-demand program guides you through a powerful process to shatter emotional barriers, overcome deep-rooted blocks, and experience the profound transformation you deserve. In just 4 hours, you'll gain the tools and insights to revolutionize your life from the inside out. Want to learn more? Click or tap the link in the show notes for all the details. Okay, now back to the episode. In Australia, we have 2 main grocery chains, and that's it. And then we have a sort of third independent. And I really, really like choosing to shop at local grocers. I like to use local supermarkets or fruit or butchers rather than the big machine, because the big machine is not fair to farmers. It jacks up prices to clients. It has a monopoly. And there is an ease about the big machine, which from time to time I need to use. I also, though, am very thoughtful about where is my money going and how does it support actual people, not just these big conglomerates. And again, time and a place for a conglomerate, I understand. And also the power of thoughtfulness can change a family's life, can change a community's life, and can change even the broader aspects of that community, the outskirts of that community. The farmers that are further away, perhaps from a city community, can have that same ripple effect. Yeah, I love that. And I love all of the things we're talking about here about that conscious choice. If you are a listener who is also a consumer, how might we ethically source jewelry, etc., from brands that help, that really truly help? How do we actually know? How do we actually know? And where do we go?
I do have a resource on my website, but also you can do a web search. When you find a company, currently there is a lot of, I don't know if it's the same term, but like greenwashing. I know it's for the more ecological. I can't remember what it's called for, the ethical fashion part, but a lot of people using language that just isn't true. And so when you do get on a website, go to the About page, see who owns it. If there's no owner on there and they're just saying all this fluffy stuff and all the buzzwords, be cautious of who's running that. You do want to see, if they do have stories about the artisans, photos of where these things are coming from, anything like that. which is, just being able to pull that in. Off the top of my head, I've worked with some really great jewelry brands. Noonday Collection. There is Raven and Lily is still around. There's a brand called Soko, Soko. They work out of Kenya, doing a lot of really modern brass and gold plated and great jewelry. Aid Through Trade is another one. They do these original roll-on bracelets that are crocheted, beaded bracelets that are really fun to stack and mix and match. And yeah, also, actually a really good resource is to get on the Fair Trade Federation or those Fair Trade certification websites. They'll list out who their clients are and who's registered with them. So those have gone through a legit source to be able to get that certification. So those are really great tools. And yeah, I think it's really just if you can, and again, connecting with local makers to be able to see the face of who's creating that and see their passion behind their business. And sure, that stuff costs a little more, but when you think about the trade-off for that, it really is worth it in the long run. And, being able to recalibrate what we find, the value of something is to say, yeah, this may cost a bit more, but I know where it came from. I know I'm supporting somebody that I know and that it's going to help them or the workers. Yeah.
And if we make the example about a candle, maybe each time you light that candle, you have a little more reverence. You have a little more of a moment of appreciation for how it was made and where it was made and the story of where it came from and how it came to be in your home. We do have so much more clutter. Australians and Americans are very high consumers. And maybe that nameless, faceless consumerism means that things go through us because they're not as meaningful. And so what if we invite ourselves to practice something more meaningful and to see what that feels like? I imagine it would feel very nice in our bodies to intentionally light that candle each morning or each evening and remember where it came from.
I love that. I just did a post on social about, one of the first things in the healing process is doing what we like the way we like it and being able to set up an environment, especially in your home, where things have meaning, that the objects that you're surrounding yourself with have some sort of story or beauty or place that you traveled. Not just like, oh, I like the look of this and I'm going to buy it from a big box store. Sure, you can create a beautiful environment, but there really is something when you've gone on a trip with your family or with your friends and you found this amazing object you were really excited about, and then you have that in your home and that energy continues to fill your home with that adventure and that beautiful time of connection. And so, as you're talking about lighting that candle and remembering who made it, it really does add to that value of life and what we're surrounding ourselves with. That's so important to our mental health. And I think we just don't realize that when we're like, oh, we can have anything we want, anytime we want it. It's so easy. For the most part, most of the things are cheap. But does that have value? At the end of the day, you walk into a space that's just purchased. It's just money.
I feel like the word we're circling, both of us, is curated. How do you curate a space that matches you and that you allow the space and time to evolve? So you're not trying to finish the whole thing straight away. And I've been guilty of that. This is no high horse that I'm on. It's more introspective, reflective thinking that I'm doing in this conversation. And so perhaps we could all have a moment of, what would it mean if I curated a space for myself? It doesn't have to start with a whole house, doesn't have to start with a room. It could start with what's on my desk, what's on my vanity, and how did I curate that? And what is there that is reflective of my values or my joy or my experience or my contribution? That's a very different kind of question than, oh, I might buy that soap from Amazon. I need some. Click. That's what I bought last time. Click. Yeah. Yeah. And look, we're busy also midlife women. Sometimes you need to click the soap on Amazon to make sure you've got soap in the house. So it's not that either, right?
Yeah.
No one's doing judging here. We're just doing some reflective thinking, I think.
I ended up burning out from the ethical fashion. I had had a few near-death experiences, had also been in some really difficult situations that throughout my 20s and 30s, you're just going, trying to figure the world out, trying to make your mark, trying to figure out where you fit in the space. And I just wasn't thinking of what that was doing to me, to be absorbing either, these stories of other people's trauma, sitting in the midst of traumatic situations with people. And then I was in a passenger plane that was flying over Kabul that almost went down coming back from India. And they had just done the food service, and the plane just the pilot was like, take your seats immediately to the service crew. And as soon as they sat down, it was just like the plane dropped food. Everybody's food they had just served went flying everywhere. People are screaming. And then the plane felt like it was dangling on a string. And I ended up finding out that there was a huge storm that was coming and they were trying to get ahead of it. But we had too much cargo to go above it, and we couldn't go below it because the Himalayas were there. So that happened. The airline, as soon as we landed, sent this big PR letter, like, this is why we hire the best people in the industry, blah, blah, blah. I was like, okay, great. I have to fly for a living. This is not ideal. And then I just kept going. And pretty soon after that, I had a trip to Nepal to work with some artisans there. And it was a Saturday. It was my only day off. I had just gone with some local people that I was working with to a place called Durbar Square, which has this incredible lineup of temples, ancient temples. Like, my brain couldn't even fathom how old these things were, all the way to more modern. So you really architecturally get to see the treasure of Nepal, like in this one square. We started walking away to go to our car and get in the car. It was 12 minutes later, and there were two younger girls in the backseat, and then the driver who I was also working with at the company. And I turned around to show the girls, oh, here's the pictures that I got, and they're showing me theirs. And I hear him saying, oh my goodness. And I can feel the car shaking. And I turn around, and I just thought maybe he was trying to dodge, a chicken or someone on a motorcycle or something. And it was just like the sidewalks shot out into the middle of the road. They were made out of brick, and the power lines were swaying back and forth, and all the birds were coming out, and people are just running out. There's just smoke and dust everywhere. And long story short, there was another earthquake the second day, but for 3 days straight, during the rest of my time for that trip, it was just survival mode, trying to make sure we weren't around anything that was going to fall on us, that would kill us, making sure we're not on a hill that's going to slide and get, some kind of mudslide or so that was pretty intense. I was living in Brooklyn, New York at the time. And when I returned, I was noticing there was some things happening, mainly when I was inside my room, where these people upstairs were always shuffling furniture in the evening. I don't know what was going on, but it was like, so I'm hearing this furniture shuffling, and I had to get on the ground and like put my hands over my head to feel safe. I just was feeling like, oh my gosh, the ceiling's going to cave in. So I wasn't still really paying attention to what was happening. And then when I went to the bodega down the street, like I always did, I'm in the chip aisle, and all of a sudden the train goes underneath and the floor's shaking, and I drop everything and cover my head in the chip aisle. And with PTSD, you don't have any control over how you're reacting. And I'd never experienced that. I am a Capricorn. I am organized. I've got it together. I show my emotions at the right time. And that was like, whoa, something is wrong. So when my brain caught up to, Lori, you're in Brooklyn, that's the train, you're at the bodega, you're fine. And I look up and this lady's pushing her cart and she looks over at me and she's like mouthing, are you okay? And I was like, yeah. And I like pick up my basket again. And at that point, I'm like, I got to get help. Like, this is not okay. I found an amazing EMDR therapist who had worked with a lot of artists. So she understood how my brain worked abstractly and was able to communicate with me through color and texture, but also through me telling the story along with the EMDR. So that was like a game changer for me. It really got me out of that patterning. And if you do have any kind of trauma, whether small or large, a certain smell triggers you, or when you get around a certain person, you shut down or react in certain ways you can't control, highly recommend EMDR. And I think you can go on the EMDR website and find a practitioner who's certified in that in your area. But with that, I kept going. My grandma passed away in Texas, which led me back to Texas, and then which was where I was originally from. And during that time, a friend had asked me to join their company. And so we went from 7 employees, and 6 years later, we had 68 employees in a 40,000 square foot facility that was manufacturing, had pivoted through COVID and made that work. And I'd gone to my doctor and she said, you've got adrenal fatigue. And if you don't stop, it's going to get worse. And I just had gotten myself in this pattern of overachieving, overdoing, striving, grasping, and I was killing myself. I was miserable. I could barely sleep at night. My gut was such a wreck. I could only eat like maybe 20 things. And then I had leaky gut. So then I would get allergic to those 20 things and then have to start at scratch again to figure out what can I eat without having a reaction. So that was then restricting me from any kind of social interactions. I couldn't go out to eat with people. If I went to people's house, I had to bring my stuff. And then the topic of conversation is like, oh, why are you bringing your own food? Oh, what are you allergic to? And then I'm just like, oh, I don't want my life to be about being sick. That's not what I want my life to be. So with that, I was working with my doctor. It was a functional medicine doctor. And I was like, I hear you loud and clear. I quit my job and I took a year off just to rest, and was thankful I had savings and I was able to do that and just live super minimally. I just ate, slept. That was about it. Tried to hang out with friends when I could. And from that, I heard a couple of things really clearly. And one of them was, one was I needed to rest. The next one was to go to this school it's Tao Touch Chine Song. And somebody had done this modality on me and it changed my life. It just started to really unlock for me things that I had been in talk therapy almost my whole life. And this was starting to really just tip things over to connect me to my own body and why I was making those choices. And it also had come up in a session with a healer that I had been seeing, that I had this spirit of unworthiness in me that was actually locking me into that pattern of trying to prove myself over and over again to the point of my detriment and my health. And so once I recognize that and go, oh, I am worthy. It's okay. And again, consciously, I didn't recognize that any of this was happening. This was all subconscious. And I would have told you, I know I'm worthy. But it wasn't until I saw this thing in my body that I'm like, oh, that's what's been hiding in there. So from that, I took that year off. I went to study, and I'm not a body worker. I've had a ton of body work on me because I really value that modality just for health maintenance. And I went to that school. It was a month in Greece, which wasn't a bad place to be, in Crete, which is where Asclepius, the god of healing, had his practice. So we do a pilgrimage to where he was and really got to see what it looked like to live life in a way that is in modern times, but also having tools of doing Qigong and Tai Chi and also self-care with the practice of Qigong Song that has helped me step out of that pattern of stress. So now when I do feel that stress coming on, I have ways to pull myself out of it and reconnect. And a lot of that is grounding through the feet, doing any kind of like rooting as if you're a tree, and then feeling that connection from the top of our head to all that knowledge and wisdom that's beyond us. And breath. I mean, the breath is like the core thing. So anytime we get into fight or flight mode, that chest breathing starts, or anytime we're having that shoulder neck kind of tension that's just miserable, automatically think, where is my breath? And drop it down into your lower abdomen, routing it through to your sacral area. And that really was a game changer for me. Also, when you think about these ancient texts of the Torah and the Bible and that idea of Yahweh, the intake and the outtake of the breath, I always thought, they always said, it's a word you can't pronounce, Yahweh. It's been Texas, it's Yahweh. And like, what does it mean? Like, that's so strange. And, I don't mystic. And what is it? And then I heard a teacher named Richard Rohr say, it's actually the breath. It's that, and that Spirit of God is with us no matter where we go, no matter who we are, no matter what we do, and that grace that's involved with that. Mm. No striving. Mm. Doesn't matter how terrible of a person you are. It's with you. All you have to do is realize, like, this breath is such a treasure. And so with all these tools and also reflecting them with, my upbringing, with the Christian realm, and then seeing these Taoist practices that are so rich and full of wisdom, I thought, okay, that door just started opening up for me to practice on people. And when I started practicing on people, I started noticing some of the same shifts that I was having, people becoming more aware of their breath, more aware of their presence within their own body, not just being these cut off heads that are walking around surviving and just, eyes and ears and nothing else. But it's like, no, what is it that I am feeling in this body? And how do I navigate life from that place? So I had been living in Texas for about 6 years at that point. And I was like, okay, where is it that I want to be? And for that year, I was calling out the place that I knew was where I needed to be. I didn't know what the name of the place was, but I made a list. And this also kind of went along with my brain therapy that I had done. And I hope I'm not going on too many tangents because
we love a tangent.
I feel like they're so good.
This is where wisdom lives, in all the threads.
Yes, this is yet another thread, but I had entered the space of, the manifestation kind of talk through science and through hacking my brain through a program called DNRS, Dynamic Neural Reprocessing System. And that took me about a year to do. But during that year that I was resting, I used those tools of listing out where it was that I wanted to be. So every time my brain was going into limbic system loop of trauma and, I don't want to be here. I'm having trouble finding community, blah, 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 all the things we don't want. It's like, okay, there's an element of truth in that. You're unhappy. So where is it that you'll be happy? And rerouting my brain to say, okay, I'm understanding I don't want this. What is it that I do want? And I said, I want a place with mountains. I want a place with art. I do want mountains, but I also want fashion. There's places it's like mountain towns, but they're a real crunchy granola, like wearing chacos every day. Nothing wrong with that. It's just not my style. And I'm in fashion and I want to wear my Izzy Miyake pants every once in a while. So it's like, I want to be able to dip into that. And so things that really I knew that would bring me life. So I listed those out. And again, every time I recognized my brain was going into, I don't want to be here. I would go, okay, what do you want? And then I would call out those things. And so with that, when it came time for me to choose a place to go, Santa Fe kind of came on the radar, and I started putting that template on there. Does it fit these things that I'm wanting in a place where I live? And it was 100% a fit. And I was like, wow, this is incredible. Okay, I'm moving to Santa Fe. It was one of the hardest moves I've ever done, because I think as I get older and get a little more rooted with, I had a house out there, my childhood friends are out there, my parents are out there. I'm an only child. So there is feels like a lot of responsibility with that. But I just was like, my heart is telling me this is where I need to be at this season in life. So I made that move and started my practice out here, Dragonfly Chi and Vitality. And it's just been wonderful to see that unfold and to see the doors open for that. I think I had started practicing in my home just with people that I knew. And then when it started to trickle beyond that, I was like, I need to get a place where people aren't coming into my home that I don't know, So I found an acupuncturist, and I had been seeing this acupuncturist, and I just thought, okay, I'm just going to start putting out there that I need this space and see what comes back to me. Not worrying, not striving anymore, not trying to call everybody in the phone book like I probably would have done in the past and just trying to force it to happen. I'm like, I'm just going to be present where I go. I'm going to do what I do and try to connect with people who are also in the wellness space and see what unfolds. And so it happened really naturally. I was telling my acupuncturist, yeah, I'm looking for a space to practice. And she said, you can practice here. I've got an extra room, and it's I've got it available on the weekends, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So now on Fridays we overlap, and, if people want to see both of us, they can. And then I'm there Saturday, Sunday, and it's just worked out really beautifully. And it's so wonderful to see people have breakthroughs in the way that they're ready for with the practice. Because for some people, they'll fall asleep and they just need deep rest and that subconscious time. I had somebody about a month ago who his wife, who had passed away, came and spoke to him, and it was really healing and closure for him. And then other people who will see colors or visions. So it's just really beautiful the way that everybody's body, according to how they interact with the world, creates that space of healing when they're connecting with their own body. And I love that the practice is so empowering too. It's not just about coming to a practitioner to see like, how can you heal me? Because we're so used to doing that with the medical Western world of you're going to fix me. And with this, it was also part of my own healing journey to realize I don't have anything I need to fix about myself. I don't have anything that I need to fix in this person that I'm working with. We're just working with what is. And part of the practice is that if I'm trying to fix them, I'm stealing their ability to heal themselves. And so even at the end, when people are like, okay, what did you feel? Or what should I do? I'll say, what should you do? What did you feel? And it always comes out when they tap into their brain stopping looking for the answer outside of them. And then it's that time to reflect inside. They're like, oh, I felt like I should do yoga a little more to help with my hips, or I need to cut this thing out of my diet, or I need to get this person out of my life. There it is. There's where the healing is. So it's really reconnecting with our own ability to trust that intuition and to trust that little voice that's telling us, hey, don't eat that candy right now, or hey, why don't you go on a walk with your friend, or call up your mom, or whatever it is. Just those little voices that lead to our happiness. It's like that little child inside going, hey, let's play. Hey, let's go skip and run. And oh, let's smell that flower as we walk by it. Just those simple things. And when we start to learn to partner with that, it starts to lead to greater and greater things, and tapping into that flow of intuition, which every single one of us has. It's really beautiful.
I can feel how aligned it is with your heart. And I'm just curious, you've had such a lovely winding road to get here. And as you sit here, I think you said you're 47. You're 47 and you look back on your timeline. We crossed through many different iterations of you to find your way home to this work. I wonder what you notice when you take a 10,000 foot view. when you're looking at the journey? Is there a wisdom available for you about that?
I look back on all that I've experienced and I see that everything happened for a reason and everything was for my evolution, for my journey of becoming more of who I'm created to be. And we can either get lost in the situations that are happening within our life, the abusive people that are around us, that it's always something else outside of us, these situations that are really stressful that cause us to think like, why is my life like this? But it's what we're allowing. And you can step a couple sides over to someone who's a lot, who has it a lot harder than you or we do, and look at their life and go, gosh, how do they even survive? How do they tolerate that? Or someone who's like super happy and be like, wow, how do I become like that? Well, it's what we allow in our environment. And it's not that we deny, but there is so much that we allow and so much that we can control. And so for me, I look back on my journey to see what I allowed. And also with the practice of the Chine song, we also learn in our dream time how to partner with ourselves and our subconscious in that dream space. And that causes really deep healing. And seeing that when you start tapping into that subconscious dream space and you're interacting with these characters in that realm, and in our dream translation that we do, it's looking at that as an aspect of ourself, that character. We also route it through the Chinese 5 elements of like the metal, wood, like any of those elements that are showing up in the dream and what they symbolize. But looking at that character and saying, okay, I have a problem with Sally and Sally's in my dream. And what I'm feeling about her in this dream is actually the part of me that I don't want to look at. And learning to see life through these characters and these archetypes who pop up in our dreams, but also that we choose to surround ourselves with. So when I was coming out of this adrenal fatigue cycle, stress cycle, I palms up. I palms upped everybody that was in my life. And I had always been striving after friendships and striving after keeping in touch with everybody and just making sure everybody felt seen. And, if they needed something, I would be there to do that. And it wore me out. But then when it was time for me to receive, it felt like nobody was around, but also I didn't have the ability to receive because I was the giver. I was the strong one. And so when it came time, when I started to look at these relationships, I let my internal palms up take place. And I stopped striving. And it was really interesting, the friends that rose to the surface and the ones that were close, that I said, hey, here's what I need from you in a reciprocal relationship. And this is my fault because I haven't let you know this is what I need to be in a healthy friendship. Mm. And when that happened, some of them rose to the occasion and were like, yes. And, we would schedule the phone calls and do the things, and other people weren't able to do that. And that was okay. Mm. And some of these were really long-term friendships that on one hand should have been just almost like a death, like a huge sadness, but I didn't see it that way. It felt like I had outgrown that space. And not to say that they're in a lower space and I'm in a higher space. It's just we were not heading in the same direction. Mm-hmm. And that's okay. Mm-hmm. Their journey is just as beautiful as what I'm experiencing. Mm-hmm. And to be able to say, I release you, and also I welcome in these relationships that I'm seeking that are more reciprocal, that are more life-giving, that are full of joy and support. And yeah, it's beautiful how it all played out.
That is so beautiful. You've been such a generous, open vessel for us today and let us see behind the curtains of so many facets of your life, which is quite extraordinary. I'm really thoughtful, though, that we're nearing the end of our conversation. And so as we all kind of gather around you, it feels like we're a community and we're all tuning into you. And we know that there's this last piece of wisdom that you're ready to share with us, as before we all farewell each other and enjoy the time and space we did share. What might that last piece be?
I would go back to the beginning of the conversation to say, what is that light for you? What is that space that brings you joy and hope and life? What are the things you're surrounding yourself with that can also contribute to that? Patterns and cycles within the daytime that could really contribute to that. And doing what you like the way you like it. That's the first step of healing. I would say that would be the big takeaway. And, back to the light thing, that's what I've lived my life off of. I didn't want to get trapped in the dogma. I didn't want to get trapped in the language of everyone saying, this is how it is. This is how it should be. There are no shoulds. There only is what is. And when that stuff was not working for me to produce the life that I wanted of adventure and magic and creation and abundance, I had to let that stuff go, which is hard when everyone you love is telling you this is the way. But to say, no, this is not what's producing that fruit in my life. So I have to choose what will produce that fruit. And it starts with the small and the tiny things that we do, even down to, how do you like your cup of tea? What kind of cup do you want to choose to drink it out of? I mean, just those simple things that lead to greater things.
And I feel like we might wave our magical fairy godmother wand and give you permission. Da-ding. You have permission to choose the things you love and give yourself that experience each and every day, even if you just want to start with that perfect cup that matches you and your heart with the exact right drink inside it that also nourishes you in whatever form that is most important to you. So it has been such a joy to talk with you today. Thank you so much for being here. Yeah. What a joy, Laurie.
So good to talk to you, Meg. It's a pleasure.
And it was your first podcast. We couldn't tell.
This was my first. Yeah.
We couldn't tell.
All those years of acting came in.
Oh, she's funny, friends. She's a funny, witty one. Alrighty. Thank you again.
Yes, thank you so much.
I'd like to thank Laurie Fox for joining me today on Wisdom Stripes. In today's episode, we explored her journey from burnout to healing, the integration of Taoist and Chinese medicine, and how she continues to use her wisdom to help others align with their true purpose. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure you subscribe so you never miss an update. You can connect with Laurie and learn more about her work at laurie-fox.com or visit her healing practice at dragonflychiandvitality.com. To stay connected with me, follow at Meg Tuohey Official on Instagram. Thank you for listening to another episode of Wisdom Stripes. I hope you gained a little wisdom today. My name is Meg Tuohey, and this is Wisdom Stripes. Thank you for listening to this episode of Wisdom Stripes. Follow me on at Meg Tuohey Official and leave a comment and review. I'm looking forward to meeting you here next time on Wisdom Stripes.